All right, we are live and all set to go.
Hello, my name is John Meter. I'm chairman of the Town of Northborough, Massachusetts Water and Sewer Commission. This open meeting of the Town of Northborough, Massachusetts Water and Sewer Commission is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on July 16th, 2022. All members of the Water and Sewer Commission are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The act allows the Northborough Water and Sewer Commission to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. At this point, I'll ask the members of the commission, when I call your name, to please respond in the affirmative. Bryant Furman.
So I do see Bryant here in the attendees. I've sent a promote to panelist, but now it's on his end to accept that to be moved over to panelists.
Okay, so we'll.
And I believe he just accepted it. So, yep, okay. He's moved over now.
Okay, so we're at the point now, members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bryant Furman. You could also unmute Bryant, please.
Okay. Present.
Thank you. David Pepe.
Present.
John Meter, present. Town staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Scott Charpentier.
Present.
Tim Davison.
Present.
Robert Luke.
Present.
At this point, I'll go through some ground rules to cover the meeting business. For the presenters and/or applicants that are listed on the agenda, I'll invite each speaker or applicant by name to make a presentation and speak to their application or item. Participants would please provide their full name and hold it until their name is called. Each speaker will be asked to mute their phone or computer when not speaking and asked to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Those responding will be asked to wait until the floor is yielded to them by the chair. Speakers who wish to respond to the comments of others, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourselves. And each vote taken by the board will be conducted by a roll call vote. We will have public comment. At this point, I'll go through the process for public comment. After the members have spoken, I'll provide public comment opportunity as follows. By phone, dial *9 to raise your hand and wait to be recognized by the chair. Please note that part of your phone number will be visible to those viewing the meeting. By Zoom, click the raise hand on the bottom of your screen and wait to be recognized by the chair. The chair will ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commenters, the chair will then call by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. So that's the ground rules, and I'll go through the process again if we have public comment appearing. At this point, I'll open the meeting, and our first item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes from the July 19th, 2022 regular meeting. I know we had an opportunity to look at the minutes before. I do actually have a couple of things, but I'll open it up to any of the other commission members if you have comments, gentlemen. Right? Anything? Now you're on mute, Brian.
No, it looks fine to me.
Okay, my only two questions are, at the very beginning, we had a motion to approve the minutes from March 22nd. That one doesn't seem to have anything as to who made the motion, who seconded. I may have just blown right through it and went right to a roll call. I don't recall. And then the other one is similar at the top of the second page for the Northgate Road item. Bryant made the motion, but there was no second indicated. Otherwise, I think everything else looked pretty good to me.
Mr. Chairman, I'll review my notes from the meeting for the minutes, motion and second. And if Bryant made the motion on the Northgate abatement, I'm pretty sure David made the second, but I'll again review my notes on that and amend it accordingly.
The previous meeting minutes, I think I may have just said, okay, it's a vote of a roll call vote as written. I think it was, so not a big issue to me.
Okay.
Okay. So our next item is
Do we want to go through the motion, second, and vote to approve the minutes of July 19th?
yes, yep. No, I'm getting ready for that. I'm just trying to remember. I got to do some other reading before we start the official. So this will be a motion by roll call to approve the minutes of the July 19th, 2022 regular meeting as amended.
Can we have a motion?
Well, it's similar to the last one. I think I just blew through it, so I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to accept
As amended.
as amended.
Thank you. Second.
Second,
All right, great. Motion made and seconded. This would be a motion by roll call to approve the minutes of the July 19th, 2022 regular meeting as amended. Commissioner Furman,
Aye.
Commissioner Pepe,
aye.
Commissioner Vier is aye. Pardon me, give me a moment, please. Okay, our next item is scheduled for 5:30. It's 5:40. This is a public hearing for consideration of a water and sewer rate adjustment. To open the public hearing pursuant to the regulations for users of the Northborough Water Supply and Distribution System, Section C, subsection 6, the Northborough Water and Sewer Commission will conduct a public hearing to consider a water and sewer rate adjustment on Tuesday, August 16th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. Pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on July 16th, 2022. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. Information as to how to participate in the public comment portion of this meeting was previously provided in the posted public hearing notice and legal ad. So I believe that's all of the official text. Just as a background, typically the way I've conducted the public hearings previously is we'll have a presentation made by town staff and the town's consultant. We'll have public comment following any questions or further comments from the commission members. And then at that point, I'll read again the public comment protocol. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Scott Charpentier, Director of Public Works, who will provide some background information and introduce our consultant on the project. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're here for our annual rate study and rate hearing. I'll give you a brief history on and summary on our rate process. So every year we go through a rate study analysis with our consultant, Raftellus Financial. The process includes a lot of facets of our finances. It evaluates our historic revenue, our recent fiscal year revenue, in this case, FY22. It looks at our approved FY22 budget and our 6-year capital improvement plan, starting with FY23 going forward. It incorporates proposed funding mechanisms for our capital improvement plan, some being funded through fund balance, each for the water and sewer funds, some through borrowing and bonds. Those projected bond expenses are incorporated into the rate study for the out years. The rate study is evaluated not just once a year, it's looked at multiple times a year. We'll do an analysis of the rate impacts for our capital improvement plan through the budget process in the fall when we're looking at the next upcoming fiscal year capital improvement projects. We'll look at it again as we're developing the operating budget in advance of the April town meeting. We'll look at it again as quarterly revenues are coming in and as our use is evaluated for the water and sewer side. So it's a living process. It's a finalized document as it's been posted on the website, but it is a process and it's a living document. We work closely throughout the year on it. We do this every year. There are anomalies that happen year to year that's important and critical that we capture that in order for us to operate and manage the finances of the two enterprise funds. So again, we have two enterprise funds, one for the water side, one for the sewer side. They're each independent of one another and independent of the general fund. All costs associated with operating the water enterprise, the water department, is paid for by the water enterprise fund, and the same with the sewer side. So that's a summary of what we do and how we got here. I'll give a brief outline of some of the topics that we had in the rate study, and then I'll give it over to Dave Fox and Raftellus to go into a little more detail, including the recommendations. So everybody knows we went through a troubling time through the pandemic. There was some significant impacts that were outlined last year during this process due to the pandemic. In FY22, we realized some of those financial impacts. So in FY21, we had a substantial increase in our share of the MWRA water use, which translated to a higher MWRA assessment in FY22. Our assessment in it typically goes up in the 5% range, 5 to 7% range every year. FY22, which reflected the impacts of the pandemic, went up over 26%. That was a $338,000 increase in the MWRA assessment, well above what we typically project. Nobody was projecting a global pandemic. So that $338,000 impact was affected our FY22 budget, and couple that with the fact that last summer was a very wet summer, our revenue was down over $100,000 from the prior fiscal year. So that was nearly a $500,000 swing in the FY22 financial fiscal year end. So in order to recover from that, we made some amendments to our operating budget in FY23. We cut a lot of our projected expenses. The FY23 budget is actually $318,000 less than 22 as a mechanism to recover our losses, so to speak, in the prior fiscal year. So I'll let Dave go into a little more detail on the process of this year's rate study and how we got to where we are. But that's what impacts there were in the FY22 process.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate that overview. I will quickly just step down kind of the procedure of how we got to where we are. Touch on a little of the details of those. Scott just did a great job of outlining the majority of them. And then I'll talk about our recommendation and get into a little bit of context and some anecdotes around that of how I'm seeing this compared to some other rates and rate increases within the Commonwealth, New England, and across the country as a whole. So in terms of process, the town does a great job of thinking about their financials multiple times throughout the year. Like Scott mentioned, it's not just a one-time deal. Looking at how things are changing throughout the year, how consumption is coming in, which is a predominant factor in how your revenues are being generated. Looking at how operating expenses are tracking, capital improvements plans, whether projects are being funded or not, or being undertaken or not, making adjustments as necessary. Financial plans are living, breathing documents. They should be updated frequently with the best information we have today. Nobody can perfectly predict 5 years from now, but we're trying to predict 5 years from now with the best information we have today on those updates annually. So what we do is we will outline, we have a detailed financial planning and rate model, which takes into consideration all of the town's operating expenses for both the water and the sewer funds. Its existing debt service schedules, principal and interest payments over the course of those debt service issuances. We look at the capital improvements plan over a 5 to 6 year period of what projects need to get funded, when those projects are predicted to be undertaken, and how much the projects are going to cost, and then how we're going to pay for them. Scott mentioned, so either reducing fund balance to be able to pay for them, paying for them out of rates in some instances, and then others going out and actually issuing new debt to pay for them, which is very common in the water and sewer industry, given it is very capital intensive for infrastructure that's lasting a long time. It makes sense to amortize those costs and pay for them over time as well, rather than all in one fell swoop, which would have significant impacts on ratepayers. So we go through the process of identifying and also looking at historical expenses and capital infrastructure investment as well. We go through a detailed process of looking at all the revenue requirements, operating expenses, debt service, pay-go capital, new debt service, and how that's going to change over a 5 year period. And why this is important is there are many communities who just look at the fiscal year that they're setting rates in. So in your instance, fiscal year 2023, and that's it. They're not looking at what's coming in fiscal year 2024, 2025, and beyond. And it can put you in a bad financial position. I mean, what happened with COVID, nobody could have predicted that, as Scott mentioned. That was not something we could plan for, but there is a lot that we can plan for. And the fact that we're thinking 5 years down the road, it allows us to plan and make adjustments and try to mitigate sharp fluctuations and increases on customers on an annual basis, and try to make them more predictable and stable increases. Unfortunately, we are talking about increases, but that is just the nature of the water and the sewer business when there are increased regulation, increased operating costs, the need to renew and replace infrastructure that's old. We're in New England. It's not a new area like it is in some areas of the country that's just new systems. So we'll look at the cash flow needs, the revenue requirements annually, and then we'll look at how are revenues coming in. What has been the trend in terms of consumption? That's the biggest driver, to be honest with you. We've been seeing a trend downward in consumption. We saw some fluctuations over the last couple of years due to COVID to some degree. in 2020, which increased your consumption and then in turn increase your MWRA assessment on the water side, as Scott was mentioning. But there's also just fluctuations from year to year that are not COVID related, like we saw last year, cool, wet spring and summer, with consumption decreases considerably. And we're seeing a very different summer this year, and consumption is changing. But on average, we've been seeing about a 1 to 2% reduction every year in consumption, which is without doing anything else that's reducing your revenue base. And so we're fighting that battle without even talking about the increased costs. So we'll monitor, how revenues are coming in and how we think revenues are changing over time. We're predicting that consumption is going to change about, reduce by about 1% every single year for the next 5 years. And we'll compare that under existing rates, your revenue stream, against those revenue requirements, against that annual cash flow need, the operating expenses, debt service, and what have you, to see where the gaps are and how much of an increase in revenue that we need. In addition to just looking at financial sufficiency, so matching up the revenues with the revenue requirements, we're also looking at the financial viability of both funds. Everybody on this call and everybody who might be watching at home, should have a savings account for their own, personal well-being and their home's personal well-being. Water and sewer enterprise funds are no different. They should have reserve funds as well for those cool and wet springs and summer, the rainy days, the project that we don't know is coming, the MWRA increase that was significant last year. By having those reserves, it allows us the ability to weather the storm, if you will, and not have to have a significant increase on our customer base or your customer base by dropping down and using some of those reserves. That's why they're there. And so we want to make sure we're not putting ourselves in a position where we're drawing those reserves down too much. We also don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're creating too many reserves, where there's just too much money sitting there, and that could be used to mitigate rate increases. So it's a balancing act of going through this process. It was a good thing. You did have a significant increase in the MWRA assessment in 2022 compared to 2021. There was a reduction, though, from 2022 to 2023 of about 14%. And if you look at the increase from where you were in 2021 to where you are in 2023, it's only about a 6% increase over that 2-year span. So let's just call it 3% a year. That's, kind of in line with where you see those MWRA increases anyway. They're usually in the 2 to 3% range. So, the fact that it balanced itself back out is favorable. I was sitting here with you last year saying, if I were a betting man, I'd think that those MWRA assessments are going to come back down to reality at some point, and hopefully fairly soon. And they did. So that was a positive change. I wish I would actually put some money on that. It would have been the first time I was actually successful betting, because I'm not a great betting man. But that was obviously a positive change coming into 2023. But there are other increases that we know are coming to pay for the capital improvements plans that are coming in 2024 and beyond, that we need to start factoring in. With all that being said, let me just get to the punchline, and then we can kind of jump back into the details as necessary. In order to support that, although we are forecasting rate increases past 2023, we are only setting rates for the upcoming fiscal year tonight, for fiscal year 2023. And what we're forecasting and what we're recommending is a 3% increase on the water volumetric rates, a 12% increase, or approximately a 12% increase on the water fixed charges, which amounts to about $2 per quarter for a residential home. And no increase at all on sewer. We've been historical over the last several years, have been planning for some resolution of the situation with Marlboro, building up some significant reserves. We hope we're getting really close to having some resolution there. At this point in time, we think we have enough of a reserve fund to mitigate the changes that are coming, potentially back payments to Marlboro, and set ourselves up in a good financial position going forward with hopefully some normalcy, without having a rate increase this year on sewer. And so the only rate increases we're talking about are on the water side. I will say with that, a typical residential customer using about 1,900 cubic feet 100 cubic feet is about 748 gallons. So that typical residential customer within Northborough, their current quarterly bill is about $340. With those increases, the $2 increase on the fixed charge per quarter and the 3% increase on the volumetric rate, that typical customer's bill will increase by $5 per quarter. So $340 to $345. To break that down a little bit more, that's obviously $15 per quarter, a little over $1.60 per month, or we're talking about a 5-cent increase per day to have the increases that we need. Thereafter, we're looking at about over the next 4 years or so in the remainder of the forecast. And obviously we're updating this, and I'll be back in front of you next year having the same conversation and updating, and hopefully the forecast is better than what we're looking at now. But we're forecasting about 4% increases on both the water and the sewer funds going forward. To provide just a little bit of context around that, and a little bit of an anecdote, or I'll provide a couple actually. Let me step back for 1 second before I get into the 4%. The 12% increase on the fixed charge, or getting the additional $2 per residential customer, you're recovering with that about 12% of your revenue from fixed charges. The national average, when we looked at industry data and survey data, is about 30%. I don't know if it's necessary for you to be in that range, but I think it would be good to start inching up as often as we can, recognizing the impacts on customers, the percentage of revenue you have coming from fixed charges. Now, this does two things. One is it can, if we increase those fixed charges too much. So if we were to jump from 12% to 30%, there would be a significant impact on low volume and typical volume residential customers, because a greater portion of their bill would be made up by that fixed charge, which they could not conserve and reduce their consumption and in turn reduce their bill. So we have to have a little bit of a balancing act there to try to get us there, over time, incrementally, and a little bit more programmatically, rather than in all one fell swoop. The benefit, though, of having more revenue coming from fixed charges is that it creates a more stable and predictable revenue stream. Whereas having the vast majority of your revenue coming from volumetric revenue, and by that, the amount of water customers use, you face the risk of what we saw last year of having a very wet, cool spring and summer where consumption declines. It can also go the other way, obviously, when you have a very hot, dry summer like we're having this year, where consumption can increase. But it mitigates those fluctuations. It gives you a little bit more of a predictable and stable revenue stream. And it's something that has been kind of trending in the industry towards having more revenue coming from fixed charges. One more thing, and I'll pause for questions. With regard to the forecasted 4% rate increases that we're seeing, we're forecasting now in 2024 and beyond. Over the last 10 to 15 years or so, we've been seeing water and sewer increases range from, about 5 to 6% a year, every single year. And so the fact that we're showing an increase on a typical residential customer this year, combined water and sewer, with the vast majority of your customers are of less than 2%. And then we're only looking at 4% thereafter combined for both the water and the sewer service. That's, it's below the national average. It's well in line with what we're seeing from other MWRA communities, if not less, to be quite honest with you. I'm working with a lot of communities that they're forecasting much higher than that. And they're trying to get into a position where they can mitigate those increases. Unfortunately, some of those communities have not taken my recommendation of doing the long-term financial planning or the 5-year financial planning and building up those reserves. So they're not quite in that position like you are to smooth things out and to mitigate and smooth out the rate increases on customers. So I know nobody ever likes to raise rates on customers. I promise you, I understand that. It's my job to recommend rate increases, and I get tomatoes thrown at me all the time. But the fact that we are keeping with the capital improvements plan, we're keeping up with reserve funds, financial viability, financial sufficiency over the next 5 years or so, recognizing that we'll have to update and make changes as things change. The fact that we're doing that within that 4% range is pretty great in my opinion. I think that's all I wanted to touch on. I think I went on for maybe longer than you were hoping for there, but I hope that was a good overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Actually, there was one other thing I wanted to touch on. Sorry, I spoke too soon. You will notice that in the 3 years, fiscal year 2023, fiscal year 2024, and fiscal year 2025, in both the water and the sewer funds, we are projecting, if you look at a pure cash flow basis, we're projecting deficits in both funds for those years. But we're doing so in such a way by balancing the need for rate increases with drawing down those reserves, while at the same exact time still maintaining that financial viability, still staying above our target level of what the reserves are, which is about 75 days of total revenue requirements. So in other words, about 20% of your total revenue requirements or total costs in both funds annually, we're still staying above that. So although you will see in the report, if you read the rate study, you will see that the water and the sewer funds in those 3 years are projected to generate deficits. On the water side, it's very minimal. Only about $3,500 in 2023, which, to be quite honest with you, is probably a rounding error. And then just about $50,000 to $60,000 in 2024 and 2025. Obviously, with the we're going to continue to update, but that gives me absolutely no heartburn at all, given that you have the reserves that you do, to be able to mitigate that and to be able to smooth the need for rate increases out over time, such that you don't have to have those higher than probably necessary rate increases. It's, again, one of the reasons why those reserve funds are there. So I just wanted to point that out. You will see that there's actually a section in the report where I think I wrote that the water fund was not generating deficits in the first few years like the sewer fund, and that's a mistake on mine. I just wanted to point that out. And again, it is not a concern whatsoever from my perspective. So with that being said, I think I will actually turn it over for questions now.
Before we go to questions, I just want to give a little context on the projected deficit, so to speak, for revenue versus expenses. Every year we go to town meeting, I stand at the mic, I speak at town meeting and ask for approval to allocate a certain portion of our revenue of our fund balance toward operating expenses. That amount is those negative numbers you see that are the delta between revenue projections and expense projections. That delta is projected in the fund balance going forward. So when Dave indicates that we still achieve our fund balance goal of 20% of our annual operating expenses of $75 for 75 days, that does take into consideration those funds that are allocated from the savings account to the operating budget. And one other thing, Dave touched on the reduction in consumption, the loss of consumption. We're fighting an uphill battle in projecting 1% less volumetric sales, so that's 1% less on the revenue side, with percentage increases on the operating side. To put in perspective, the general fund in Northborough typically projects a 3 to 3.5% increase annually in order to maintain current level of service. So you mimic that in the water and sewer funds, that's 3.5% more revenue needed every year, with 1% less sales coming in. That's a 4 to 4.5% change when you consider the fixed charges. So we take a conservative approach to our projections in the rate study, and we also take a conservative approach to our expenditures during the year. So thank you, Dave, for a very thorough explanation and little industry perspective. So if there's any questions from the commission.
No, I'll have just a little bit of further background. We did review the draft study at our meeting last month, so we've had an opportunity to review all the data and provide our comments individually. So I have no further questions. I guess my only comment would be, at some point, I think the volumetric number will you can only squeeze so much. So I would think that at some point in the future, we would have a pretty good understanding of what the volumetric number is, because there's not a whole significant amount of growth that's, I don't think, likely to occur in town. So we may have some more stability in terms of knowing what that fixed charge should be versus, what our volumetric number is, even if it is shrinking. in my mind, can't shrink forever, but you may have a different opinion, Scott. I don't know.
Every shower head you buy puts less water out. Every change you do to your bathroom and your kitchen uses less water.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. I mean, I think at some point it will plateau some and we won't continue to see the annual decreases that we have been seeing. And it's not just Northborough, it's across the industry. Just per capita reductions in consumption have been a trend. I think the vast majority of that is for the issues that just, Scott just raised, low flow fixtures and just updating homes and renovating homes, toilets, shower heads, different fixtures. They are just more, they're just higher efficient. But at some point, I think they're in, to some degree, I think there's also maybe they're becoming more of an awareness by the general public of the right thing to do to conserve. And as water and sewer rates continue to increase, people are paying more and more attention to that and recognizing that if they do conserve, they can save some money. So, but I do agree, John, and I think it's been coming for some time. We probably are reaching the point where that's going to plateau to some degree, but I think we still have a little bit of wiggle room to reduce. I mean, especially if you look at, some of the, areas of the country that are really strapped for water, their consumption levels are much lower. If you look at Europe, which will probably not ever have the per capita consumption levels of Europe, it's even lower. So I think we can go down, but you're right, it can't go to zero. People need water.
And I guess just my final comments, just to reiterate, we are doing this rate review on an annual basis. And as Dave and Scott have mentioned, we're going to continue to do that because we think that it provides a good value for the money that goes into that effort. And at this point, I guess I'll ask if any of the other commission members have any questions or further comments.
I have none.
Okay. David, anything?
No, I have none either.
Okay. At this point, we are available for public comment. Our webmaster, Jim, can you indicate whether you have anybody in there?
Mr. Chairman, we have one attendee. If our attendee wishes to comment, raise your hand. I don't see a hand going up. Going once, going twice, 3 times a lady. No public comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. That's good. I don't have to read all that other stuff again. However, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second,
All right, a motion's made and seconded. This will be a motion by roll call to close the public hearing of the Northborough Water and Sewer Commission. Commissioner Furman,
Aye.
Commissioner Pepe,
aye.
Commissioner Meter is aye. Vote is unanimous. And at this point, we have any further conversation regarding the rates and the fixed charges?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion to adopt the water and sewer rates as presented at tonight's public hearing.
Motion to adopt the rates as been presented in this meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. This will be a motion by roll call to adopt the water and sewer rates as presented to the commission tonight at the public hearing. Commissioner Furman,
Aye.
Commissioner Pepe,
Aye.
Commissioner Meter, aye. The vote is unanimous. And that, I guess, closes the official presentation regarding the water and sewer rate study. I'd again like to thank Mr. David Fox from Raftellus Financial Consultants for your efforts and time. It's always great to have you participate with us. It's providing a good level of confidence, I think, to everybody here.
Well, thank you for saying that, John. My pleasure. It's always great working with you all. You're one of the shining clients that I have. So I appreciate you always providing the feedback and the input that you do. It makes my job easier. So it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, folks.
I see on the agenda, there's nothing further. Is there any late breaking business you need to discuss, Mr. Charpentier?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to schedule our next meeting while we have everybody present. And we can, you and I, Mr. Chairman, can work out the agenda at another time.
Okay, so you want to set a date?
Yes, please.
Okay, go for it.
How does September 20th, does that work for everyone? Or how about the 27th? The 27th may be better. It gives us a little more time to, one, iron out an agenda, and two, to compile data associated with those agenda items. So maybe the 27th.
I'm good with that.
Works for me.
Okay, this will be in Town Hall?
Yeah, we'll do an in-person meeting, Town Hall, Conference Room B, 5:30 PM, if it works for the commission. And I'll work with the chair to put together an agenda.
Okay, that sounds good.
Great, thank you.
All right, hearing nothing further, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Motion's been made and seconded. This will be a motion by roll call to adjourn the meeting of the Northborough Water and Sewer Commission. Commissioner Furman,
Aye.
Commissioner Pepe,
aye.
Commissioner Meter votes aye, so it's unanimous. So I guess